Hello everyone, my name is Arceus8523. I'm representing Sorcerers of the Shore, and welcome to the Bafflem debut video. As lead designer for Bafflem, I am incredibly excited to finally share this set with you. Bafflem is virtually unprecedented in more ways than one, and I'm sure you're all eager to see how. So, let's get into it. Bafflem is unlike any other plane in the multiverse. It is a highly unstable plane that will open up rifts to other worlds that can suck structures, landscapes, and even inhabitants themselves into it. This leads Bafflem to being a world that is a logic-defying hodgepodge of all sorts of different landmarks, appearances, and types of life. The world is strange, unpredictable, and lacks the sort of common sense most other planes have to some degree. It's strange, surreal even, but some of Bafflem's residents might call it beautiful in its own unique way. Not only is Bafflem a world like no other, but it's a set like no other. Bafflem toys with some weird mechanics that have only briefly been touched in previous sets. Walk the Grave, for example, is an aura that enchants a card in your graveyard, being the first card to enchant something in the graveyard since Spellweaver's Volute all the way back in Future Sight. Not only does Bafflem explore some strange mechanics from Magic's past, it also has its own swath of exciting and experimental cards. Knight of Seasons, for example, rotates between having 4 different keywords based on how long it's been in play. It's a powerful creature that is typically ahead of rate given its stats and keyword selection. Whether or not the keyword it currently has is best for the game state, however, is another story. Furthermore, Bafflem draws upon designs that were probably never meant to see the light of day. At least, not in Black Border. Cherry Picker probably seems familiar to a good deal of you, and that's because it was featured as one of the test cards in Convention Edition Mystery Boosters. Bafflem features a small number of direct functional reprints of playtest cards from Mystery Booster Convention Edition to see how they would fare in a serious constructed setting. Bafflem is odd, Bafflem is exciting, and Bafflem is experimental. However, one thing that Bafflem is above all else is 6-color. Yes, you heard me right. Bafflem introduces a brand new color to the game of Magic. Purple. Purple is intended to be a fully fleshed out individual color. That is to say, it stands on its own without any special rules attached to it. It is simply and flat out a new color and works the same way any of the other 5 colors do, with its own identity, flavor, and mechanics. Its basic land is Caves, which itself has a new subtype, where any land with the Cave subtype taps for purple automatically. Purple allies itself with red and green and has the enemies of white and black. However, with blue, it has a new type of relationship. Because purple and blue are so far apart from one another on the color wheel, they have no preference to one another of any kind, making them into an indifferent pairing. Now then, for a new color to be introduced, one central question must be answered. Why does this color deserve to exist? From that question comes many others, of course, and the first one to address is what flavorful space purple color covers. Firstly, and most centrally, purple is a color of fate and destinies. Most purple-aligned beings have ties to fate, destiny, or probability, whether that is an oracle gazing into the future or someone who seems to get lucky at every possible turn. Purple is all about controlling and affecting outcomes, whether that is predicting and changing the future or making the improbable unavoidable. Next, we come to the idea of balance. Since purple is a color all about seeing, predicting, and manipulating the future and the outcomes of events, it can create events and happenings that are held together only by the absolute perfect condition, and that can be disrupted with the slightest alteration to these conditions, even when it seems like the odds of everything working out are 1,000,000 to 1. Similarly, though, it can disrupt these impossible events and perfect scenarios as easily as it can create them. Moving to the more concrete side of the color, purple in the physical world is commonly depicted by and correlated with the stars. Since early human history, the stars have been used as a tool of prediction, whether that is determining the season, foretelling the future, or deriving bad omens, and many purple beings rely upon them as a source of their powers. However, while some purple beings get their powers from the sky, others get it from the ground. Much like the stars have been read to predict what the future may hold, various crystals and gemstones have been thought to possess a similar power. Some purple wizards rely on magic crystals to help them see and manipulate fate, destiny, or the future. And since crystals are typically formed underground, caves can often be found laced with purple mana. The next most important thing to address is what sets purple apart mechanically, and at the center of its mechanical identity is the theme of deck manipulation. Since purple is all about seeing, knowing, and predicting the future, it only makes sense that somebody playing a purple deck would have a good deal of knowledge about what cards are in each player's deck, and roughly where in the deck those cards lie. Wheel of Day and Night, for example, allows an astute purple player to accurately know what cards are on the bottom of their library if they keep track of the cards manipulated with its effect. Speaking of its effect, if it seems familiar, that's because it is. Wheel of Day and Night is a color shift of Wheel of Sun and Moon, and is one of many color shifted cards in Bafflem to show how certain effects now fit in the purple. In the same category as deck manipulation, purple is the best color at scrying. With its extensive scry capabilities, a purple player can always know what card they are about to draw and dig into their deck to set up the card sequence that best allows them to win the game. Fortune of Foresight, for example, is a sorcery that scries 10 cards, the largest numbered scry ever printed. Imagine what sort of play sequences you can set up with that much information. Of course, with all the scry and deck manipulation, a purple mage should usually be able to confidently know what card is on the top of their library, and possibly even what the top of their opponent's library is. Striped Oracle lets you take advantage of that knowledge by giving you a chance to possibly cast one of the most powerful cards in your deck for free, so long as you can get it to the top of your library. Purple doesn't draw cards often, and the high amount of efficient scry should be able to help mitigate pockets of unwanted cards. However, when purple does want to add cards to the hand, it usually does so by putting cards from the bottom of their library into their hand. Arbiter Ividor, for example, changes all of your draws so that you are now drawing from the bottom of your deck. This can be especially potent with things like scry effects, so you can tuck a needed card away on the bottom of your deck and get it back with Ividor's effect. Ividor also has the bonus effect of making it harder for your opponent to cast spells targeting your creatures, since they'll also have to put a card from their hand on the bottom of their library to do so. Not only can purple change around the order of the library, it can also put cards back into the library, whether they be yours or your opponent's. This serves as purple's central form of removal. While Sweep from Reality may only be able to send this target to the top of the deck, purple has the ability to place just about anything, anywhere into the deck, and shuffling a problem creature away means that hopefully you won't be seeing it for a while. That being said, though, purple has difficulty permanently removing things, and there's always a chance that your opponent draws the card you removed and replays it. Sweep from Reality, as you can probably tell, is a color shift of the iconic Totally Lost, and demonstrates this sort of once blue effect making its way over the purple. One of purple's primary creature keywords is lifelink. Part of purple's identity is always being ready for what's to come, and creatures with lifelink help ensure you'll have extra life to face threats in the game further down the road, as well as being a way to show a purple creature's mystical connection with destiny or the future. Furthermore, in the vein of creating and altering balance, purple has the ability to switch the power and toughness of creatures. In fact, most purple creatures don't have equal power and toughness to allow for full capitalization of this effect, such as Glimmer Chaser, a small creature with lifelink that has the ability to switch its own power and toughness, allowing it to be slightly better suited for specific combat scenarios. While purple does in part integrate effects from other colors into its primary identity, it also has its own swath of lesser or rarely used mechanics that fit within that primary identity. One of these mechanics is creating enchantment tokens. While there have been a few cards that individually create enchantment tokens, purple will be able to reliably create a wide swath of enchantment tokens about as easily as a color like white or green can create creature tokens. Fluxomancer, for example, can create aura tokens that enchant your creatures and give them -1/+1. Playing into purple's focus on balance and equilibriums, effects that gain a creature power or toughness at the equal loss of the other stat are one of purple's most common ways to manipulate creatures, and can often be seen on auras and combat tricks. Just like purple can create enchantment tokens, it also has the ability to create land tokens. As mechanical space has been almost completely untouched, purple can access this effect without truly encroaching upon or needing to take from the space of any other color. It also expands the number of colors that have means to get extra lands into play, so green does not have monopoly on that category of effect. Another area of mechanical space that doesn't truly have a home is exchanging control of permanents. While it is most commonly seen in blue, as is seen with the card Overwhelming Foresight is color shifted from Eyes Everywhere, exchanging control of permanents has appeared less than 30 times in all of Magic's history. The mechanic perfectly fits purple's idea of manipulating fate by ensuring that specific permanents end up in specific places on the battlefield when you most need them there. That being said, purple does share a lot in common with blue, and that is by design. Lately, a common complaint of many Magic the Gathering players is that blue seems to have a stranglehold on mechanical design space, and is just consistently all around too good. This is in part because for quite some time, a lot of the stranger and new card effects designed have been added to blue's identity by default. Overall, between reliable deck manipulation, the best card draw, counterspells, and various ways to remove things even after they have been resolved, blue has a stranglehold in constructed formats and is considered by many players to be the best color. In addition to the effects firmly within its identity, blue sees its design space pushed into other colors' territories more often than any other color. Purple seeks to lessen blue's mechanical reach by in part assuming some of blue's mechanical idea, namely its deck manipulation abilities. While effects like Scry have not entirely been removed from blue, in fact, you will see a good deal of blue Scry in Bafflem, deck manipulation and general card selection abilities have been moved to secondary in blue in favor of being primary in purple. Further separating blue from purple is that purple has access to lesser used and relatively untouched design space with effects like enchantment tokens, land tokens, and switching power and toughness. I think one of the easiest ways to highlight the split between blue and purple is to focus on key places where they contrast one another. Whereas blue has the ability to draw cards, purple knows what cards it's drawing. While blue pursues knowledge through study and practice, purple sees to foretell fate, destiny, or the future with its magical abilities. Blue has the ability to directly manipulate and travel through time, while purple can see through time and use that knowledge to act in the present to change the future. While blue can use its mind manipulation to gain control of creatures, purple can alter a creature's fate so it ends up in a certain position on the battlefield, usually by exchanging it with another creature. Something important to highlight between the two colors is the presence of sphinxes. As we saw with Striped Oracle, purple can feature sphinxes within its identity, however, they are a prominent creature type in blue. Where blue sphinxes and purple sphinxes differ is in the sorts of powers and abilities they have. Blue sphinxes are scholars, or keepers of a great truth or knowledge, and tend to be fond of riddles. Purple sphinxes, on the other hand, are oracles and prophets, and are able to predict the future or manipulate the fate of an individual. With purple's introduction, it acquires sphinxes as its iconic creature type. Sphinxes used to be the iconic creature type of blue, however, that role will be filled by the sea monster creature type, such as leviathans, serpents, and most prominently, krakens. The last thing I want to address with purple is how it affects two color combinations. More specifically, I want to look at purple's impact on dual lands. First and foremost, purple adds an additional color to a set's draft and sealed environment, and thus lowers the average amount of each color that a booster pack will contain. In the interest of keeping the limited environment playable, and to facilitate a likely influx of more limited decks using 3 or more colors, even outside of multicolored sets, all dual lands from here on out will be uncommon or lower rarity. This doesn't mean dual lands are getting less powerful or worse at fixing mana, it just means they'll be showing up in booster packs more frequently than in prior sets. However, purple's introduction not only increases the number of individual colors, it also means there's an increase in 2-color pairings, an increase to 15 pairings to be exact. 15 is an odd number, which means there is no way to evenly divide dual lands into 2 cycles as before. So, how are dual lands in 6-color sets going to be divided? Well, not into 2 cycles, but into 3. 2 large cycles of 6 cards, one for the allied colors and one for the enemy colors, and 1 small cycle for the 3 indifferent color pairings. This brings me to Bafflem's land cycle. Bafflem features a cycle of allied dual lands designed by guest designer Mercy Q. They can each enter the battlefield with 2 charge counters on them and can tap lands for colorless and can tap themselves for colorless mana. However, they also have the ability to tap another land you control and remove one of their charge counters to add 1 mana of either of 2 colors. These lands work sort of like filter lands. However, they don't need to tap themselves to filter and have a limited number of uses before becoming a plain land that just taps for colorless. Now, we've talked a lot about purple, we've talked a bit about blue, let's talk about a third color, white. Whereas blue had an issue where its identity was too big, white seemed to have the opposite problem. Its identity was too small. Well, perhaps small isn't the term. Rather, white's identity is unexplored and overall has relatively little mechanical push compared to other colors. In general, white has been relegated to a support color at best in most constructed formats, and has struggled to stay relevant in constructed formats compared to other colors. Being such an experimental set, Bafflem aims to explore ways white can broaden its mechanical identity without encroaching into the space of other colors or breaking from its flavorful identity. Being experimental, there's no guarantee all of the future design pushes for white will be seen in other Sorcerers of the Shore releases, but each of the mechanical explorations white takes in the set aims to address some sort of complaint or grievance tied to the color. Speaking of those complaints and grievances, let's look at a few of them. The first one that we get here at Sorcerers of the Shore, and probably get the most frequently, is that white can't draw cards. I used to prescribe this myself to this mentality. However, a good friend of mine pointed out that isn't necessarily where the issue lies. The issue lies in the fact that white just can't access or dig into the deck in any way. While every other color has some way to get into the deck and work past pockets of dead draws and ensure the cards they most need find their way into the hand, white has no such clear mechanic. This brings up the question of how white can access the deck without breaking its mechanical identity. And the place I started looking was what white could do within its mechanics that could then be tied to more deck access. That brought me to one relatively unexplored facet of white's identity. White can tax. Taxing is white's ability to increase the amount of mana opponents have to spend to play spells. However, what if paying additional mana wasn't the only way to pay a tax? White can tax to draw cards. That's right. Bafflem is finally printing the highly requested white color shift of the popular enchantment Rhystic Study. With World's Decree in play, your opponent is taxed whenever they cast a spell, needing to either pay an extra mana or allow you to draw a card. This makes World Decree either a hindrance that slows the opponent down or a source of card advantage from the deck, which is relatively unprecedented for white. In addition to World's Decree, Bafflem also features Tides of the Splendid, a take on a white card draw spell. Tides of the Splendid has the potential to draw you a lot of cards for a relatively low mana investment, but only if the opponent doesn't pay mana to prevent the effect from happening. In the event they do, however, you still gain 1 life as compensation. Playing Tides of the Splendid when the opponent is tapped out can be the critical play that pulls you ahead in the game, another area where white is lacking that will be covered in more detail shortly. However, taxing isn't the only way to interpret white accessing more of the deck. Another way to design fitting white deck access is to create a new effect that flavorfully is tied to white. So what part of white's identity could be translated to deck access? Its ability to investigate, inspect, and search for objects or individuals. We have previously seen this sort of flavorful space tied to deck access with cards like Thraben Inspector, but guest designer Corpco came up with his own mechanical take on this concept. Stellar Scouter already has a decent body as a 2-mana 2/2, but it has an ability where, when it enters the battlefield, it exiles the top card of your library face down, and you have the option to look at it. Then, whenever you draw a card, you have the option to instead put the card exiled with Stellar Scouter into your hand. This unique mechanical take on deck filtering depicts a search for someone or something and mechanically gives white the option to replace an unknown draw with a known card, or just bypass using that known card entirely if it isn't useful in the current game state. Next up to be addressed are a pair of criticisms that I believe are thematically tied together by a core theme. Firstly is the criticism that white can't ramp, and second is the statement that white is worse than every other color. While white does lack ramp, it is indicative of a larger issue of the color's current state, and the core reason behind why white just seems worse than any other color. White doesn't have a consistent way to pull ahead of the opponent, whether that's in resources in play or in cards in the hand. In fact, a good deal of white effects aim to keep you at parity with your opponent by either catching you up to them or slowing them down to your pace. Meanwhile, every other color has some way to pull ahead, whether that's blue's card draw, black's hand destruction, red's direct damage, purple's powerful deck manipulation, or green's ramp. What makes this tricky is part of white's core identity lies in the idea of group benefit and selflessness over selfishness, and effects that pull you ahead in the game clash with these ideas. So where in white's identity can effects that help pull you ahead of the opponent fit in? Well, white can tax. Taxing can slow down the opponent and allow you to gain the upper hand by out-tempoing the opponent. Deadlocked, for example, can be cast in the early game, especially on an opponent's turn, to make the next spell that player casts cost 2 mana more to cast, which in some cases can outright force an opponent to skip casting spells for an entire turn. It isn't quite a counterspell like some has proposed in expansions to White Identity, but more of a delay effect, a way to trip up the opponent and create a window to jump ahead. Guest designer Tiger Soul proposed his own take on taxing as a way to cause tempo loss. His design is a 3-mana 3/2 creature with a powerful ability that triggers when it enters the battlefield, forcing the opponent to either start their next turn with two less mana or let the Harbinger become a 5/4, far ahead of the rate of a normal 3-mana creature. Both options are typically undesirable for the opponent, especially when the Harbinger comes down on turn 3. However, neither of these designs take a stab at white ramp. For that, a more flavor-based approach needs to be taken. White is a color of standard and order, and has more effects that benefit creatures of only its color compared to the other 5 colors. Similarly, white also has effects that allow it to search their library for plains cards. Thus, I think it's pretty clear to say that white likes to be played alongside more white, and prefers to be monocolored more than any of the other colors. Thus, Reconstruct the Skies, a 2-mana white spell that can be cast to find any plains in your deck and put it into your hand, is set to address white ramp, because if you control only plains, it puts it onto the battlefield untapped, making it more efficient than most green forms of ramp, but at the cost of color diversity. Well, we've talked about a lot of what Bafflem means for the game of Magic as a whole, and seen a good deal of exciting preview cards from the set, but we haven't talked much about the set itself. So, what's happening on Bafflem exactly? Well, as I previously stated, Bafflem is an unstable plane that sucks other planes into it. It's a hodgepodge of worlds with a good deal of Bafflem's own strangeness mixed in. Sucked up in one of these rifts is Void, a law mage who now finds himself lost in an unfamiliar world. Bafflem's first story spotlight card, Unplaced, can tuck a creature or planeswalker to the bottom of the deck at instant speed, representing how Void became so easily lost in this strange world. Void quickly comes to see Bafflem as unstable, wrong even, and since he can't return to his own homeworld, he's going to fix Bafflem, make it more predictable and safer, and make the residents of the worlds happier because of it. It seems Void arrived at a good time, too, since shortly after he arrives, Bafflem starts becoming even stranger. The stars were beginning to fall from the sky. The first falling shows the first star to crash to the earth, and expands upon the idea of red enchantment hate that started back in Commander 2018 with Enchantress Bane. In Bafflem, stars are commonly represented by enchantments and effects that allow the interaction with enchantments. Now, Bafflem's residents are coming together to gather the fallen stars and return them to their rightful place in the sky. The leader of the recovery effort is a girl who simply calls herself the Star Saver, and she has a powerful effect that can give your enchantments extra longevity by replacing your non-token enchantments with token copies when those enchantments leave the battlefield. Bafflem might be a strange world with strange mechanics, but that doesn't make it incoherent. Bafflem is just as much a set designed for draft, seal, and standard play as it is an experimental set with crazy mechanics. So, let's take a look at some of the core mechanics Bafflem is centered around. The first mechanic is one to talk about is one you've seen glimpses of on the spoiler cards so far, Initiative. Initiative is a new evergreen keyword, which means it'll show up in all future Sorcerers of the Shore sets and will retroactively change the oracle text of previous cards that use Initiative's effect. Initiative is a keyword that merely replaces the phrase, when this permanent enters the battlefield, and by introducing it, it reduces the number of words on cards and saves valuable text box real estate. However, beyond that, it opens up mechanical design space that I, as well as official Magic R&D, have been trying to develop for quite some time. And that is the ability to copy enters the battlefield effects, or initiative abilities as they are now called. The introduction of Initiative makes it unambiguous which effects can and cannot be copied with abilities like the one Pursuer of Presidents has. Next up, I'm going to talk about another of the Mystery Booster Convention Edition playtest cards, Biting Remark. It features a mechanic on it called Scrycast, which allows you to cast the card for its Scrycast cost if you see it while scrying. While Biting Remark itself didn't make it in, the Scrycast mechanic did, and works particularly well with Purple's extensive scry and deck manipulation effects. That being said, however, to facilitate the mechanic in Limited, all colors are getting more access to scry than they normally would, such as Red getting Magma Jet reprinted. The next mechanic to look at, despite being featured on a Mystery Booster playtest card, actually has origins back to the third Great Designer Search, where one of the finalists designed this card as part of a trial to design a multicolored card of each color combination. It then got printed into the Mystery Booster playtest cards, and is what I like to call a cumulative modal spell. It gives you different modes that each have a different value assigned to them, and allows you to choose any combination of modes any number of times, so long as those modes total exactly a certain number. In Pick Your Poison's case, that number was 4. Pick Your Poison ended up getting functionally reprinted into Bafflem as Concoction of Catastrophe, the black-green uncommon. And from here on out, this variety of modal spell will be deciduous in Sorcerers of the Shore sets, which means that it won't be featured in every set like an evergreen keyword, but it can be used at any time it feels necessary to a card or set's design. Other deciduous mechanics include things like Protection and Hybrid Mana. Going back to the Mystery Booster playtest cards, seeing a theme yet? Is a card called Bucket List, which drew you cards after casting certain types of spells, then drew you an additional card once you had cast a spell of every type. The card placed counters over specific boxes to keep track of which types of spells you had cast, which is a mechanic I've coined the term of being a checklist card. However, its use of counters seemed off to me, as counters have interactions with various mechanics such as Proliferate, which can lead to confusing or unintuitive interactions with this card coming up frequently. Thus, I created markers as a new type of game piece to track the completion of these checklist cards. Markers are somewhat like counters, however they are not a type of counter, and effects that interact with counters do not interact with markers. The important difference between a counter and a marker is that a counter tracks quality, while a marker tracks a specific location on the card, represented by boxes, as can be seen in Duty to Life's checklist. On checklists, each effect with a box next to it is considered a condition, and an unmarked condition is one that doesn't have a check marker on its corresponding box. While checklists are only one of many ways markers have the potential to be used, they are the only way markers appear in Bafflem. The next thing I want to highlight is one of Bafflem's returning mechanics, Morph. Morph has consistently been one of Magic's more popular mechanics and allows you to cast cards face down as 2/2 creatures for 3 generic mana, with the ability to turn them face up for their morph cost. Wellspring Displacer, for example, can be cast for its morph cost and then turned face up for only 3 mana, circumventing its 5 mana hard casting cost. Plus, it has an ability where when it or another permanent you control is turned face up, if it's an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land, you get to draw a card. On top of that, it has one more ability that lets you copy instant and sorcery spells if you cast them from the battlefield. Wait, what? And you thought we were done with the Mystery Booster playtest cards. There is one last one to talk about. Spellmorph was introduced with the aptly named Spellmorph Raise Dead, and is an ability that lets you cast instant and sorcery spells face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 generic mana. Then you can cast them at any time for their Spellmorph cost. Spellmorph Raise Dead has been functionally reprinted in the Bafflem as Raven's Return, and having a Spellmorph alongside with Morph creates for a unique environment where you never know if your opponent's face-down creature has a Morph effect or is a Spellmorph spell, which means you have to be prepared for just about anything. Lastly, we are going to take a look at a mechanic that debuted all the way back in Future Sight as a glimpse into Magic's future, Aura Swap, which allows you to pay the card's Aura Swap cost to exchange it with a card in your hand, which means that an aura with Aura Swap is returned to your hand, and the new aura is put onto the battlefield, enchanting whatever the first aura was. I'm excited to tell you that the future is today, as Bafflem features Aura Swap as one of its primary mechanics. It may seem like Bafflem features a lot of mechanics, and that is true. However, 3 of the 7 mechanics are debuts of evergreen or deciduous mechanics that will show up in future Sorcerers of the Shore sets. Bafflem is setting a precedent for future mechanics that can further enhance card design and sets. More tools and an extensive toolbox for making the best Magic sets Sorcerers of the Shore possibly can. Now we've covered the basics of Bafflem's plot and highlighted its mechanics. How would you all like to meet the Planeswalkers you'll find during this visit to Bafflem? Ig is a troll who comes from a music-based plane somewhat similar to Bafflem. He is incredibly shy and easily spooked. He has a deep appreciation for nature and often likes to hide among it as a way to be more in tune with his environment. Though, this also has the added benefit of being a relatively safe way to hide from perceived threats. Ig has a unique ability to temporarily share with his Planeswalker Spark amongst all beings small enough to ride on him. Using this ability, he keeps a growing collection of insects from across the multiverse, which he considers his friends. However, his closest companion is a talking mouse named Demetrius, who he met on his home world. Ig doesn't know too many words, so Demetrius acts as the mediator between Ig and other beings Ig meets along his insect collecting journey. He has also taken up the role of keeping the troll safe from anything that has scared him, and helps Ig discover all the wonders of the worlds they visit. The duo had been on Bafflem when the first stars began to fall, and despite his cowardly nature, Ig felt a strong desire to help the residents of Bafflem once he learned what was going on. The two are now working alongside the Starsaver to collect the stars so they can be returned to the sky. His card for 1 generic mana and 2 green mana is a 3 loyalty planeswalker with 3 abilities. +1, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. 0, turn Ig face down. He is a forest land for as long as he remains face down. Turn him face up at the beginning of your next upkeep. -X, look at the top X cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature and or land cards from among them and put those cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Gleedon comes from a world where birds are the dominant species. He grew up studying birds and soon took an interest in not just birds, but all sorts of animals, and how they were tied together in ancient biological connections. Upon finding an ancient lost species he had been seeking to study his whole life, his Planeswalker spark ignited, and he found himself with worlds upon worlds of unique ecosystems, each with thousands of their own species to study. What brought Gleedon to Bafflem, however, is the phenomenon of megafauna. 2 animals of the same species can be drastically different sizes, with the larger of the 2 able to tower over him. He wants to understand how and why these megafauna emerge, and whether they are a different species from their normally sized counterparts. His card for 2 generic mana, 1 red mana, 1 green mana, and 1 white mana enters the battlefield with 1 loyalty counter on him. But he also has an initiative ability where, when he enters the battlefield, he creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Then his loyalty becomes equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. This means he'll always start with at least 3 loyalty, but he can become way bigger. He also has a second ability where, at the beginning of each of your steps and phases, if you control a creature, his loyalty becomes equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. This essentially means that during your turn, Gleedon's loyalty is always equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. He also has 2 loyalty abilities. As a -2, he puts a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control, and as a -X, he deals X damage to any target and you gain X life. Astia Rowe is a Sphinx native to Bafflem. She is a scholar who wants to better understand Bafflem and why it is so unstable. She worked with Void to discover there are fluctuations of mana that roll through the plane which cause these ripples, and particularly intense ones are what cause the vortexes that suck up other worlds. However, neither are sure of the source or cause of these ripples, but amidst trying to locate it, the first stars began to fall, and Astia immediately turned her attention to discovering the cause of it and what could be happening, while Void, on the other hand, remained much more concerned with their initial efforts. Astia's card for 2 generic mana and 2 blue mana enters the battlefield with 4 loyalty counters on it and has 3 abilities. As a +1, target opponent chooses a card name. Then you look at the top card of your library. If the revealed card doesn't have the chosen name, you can reveal it and draw 2 cards. As a -2, Astia turns a creature face down, which means that creature becomes a 2/2 and can only be turned up face up again if it has a morph ability. Astia's -7 ability exiles her along with up to 5 target permanents your opponents control. Then that player separates the exiled cards into 2 piles. You get to put 1 pile onto the battlefield under your control and 1 pile onto the battlefield under that player's control. Well, that's all for now, but you've only just begun to see what all of the set and world of Bafflem have to offer. There are some truly wild designs left to cover and a lot more to delve into with the set's central mechanics and more story to uncover. Be sure to check out my MTG Cardsmith profile so you can catch all of the latest Bafflem spoilers, and thank you so much for joining me on this amazing debut video.